We like to think that human interaction has fundamentally evolved. Like we walk into these bright, glass-walled offices, we sit in highly democratic meetings where everyone supposedly has a voice.
Right, everyone gets a turn to speak.
Exactly. We use HR-approved language on Slack, and it all just feels very civilized.
Well, yeah, it creates this illusion of rationality. I mean, we operate under this assumption that we've left the dark tribal ages completely behind us and just replaced them with pure meritocracy and fairness.
But the reality is that underneath that polite, ergonomic surface, we are dealing with the exact same boiling, ruthless power dynamics as a scheming Renaissance court. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are exploring the hidden mechanics of human interaction.
Yeah, we're dissecting some of the foundational ideas from Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power, specifically focusing on the preface and the first 6 laws.
And the mission for this deep dive is to really give you, the listener, a shortcut to understanding the mechanics of influence.
Right, because we are deliberately stripping away the moral judgments today. We're looking at the raw mechanical reality of power. Because whether you want to actively climb to the top or, you simply want to understand the board so you don't become a pawn in someone else's game, you have to look at the gears of the machine without flinching.
So we're exploring a world where modern life demands everything look fair and democratic, but the underlying psychological drivers, envy, greed, fear, vanity, those haven't changed in thousands of years.
Not at all.
But before we even get to the specific tactics, we have to talk about the mindset required to navigate all this. The text makes a massive point about emotional detachment.
Oh, it is the absolute prerequisite. I mean, the single greatest barrier to holding or gaining power is an emotional response.
Yeah.
If you want to navigate this space, you have to train yourself to achieve total emotional detachment.
Think about it like operating a massive piece of heavy machinery, right? Yeah. If a gear jams or a belt snaps, you don't start yelling at the machine.
Yeah, that won't help.
You don't cry about how unfair the metal is being to you. You just diagnose the mechanical failure and fix it. Getting angry or taking it personally just gets your hand caught in the gears. Your emotions make you predictable, and predictability makes you an easy mark.
Exactly. And the source text uses a brilliant historical metaphor for this exact state of mind. It brings up the Roman deity Janus.
The two-faced god, right.
Right. Janus was the double-faced god, the guardian of gates and doorways. So, to master these dynamics, you need to cultivate that dual perspective. One face must look continuously to the future, anticipating pitfalls and calculating long-term outcomes so nothing catches you by surprise.
And the other face?
The other face looks constantly to the past. But crucially, not to dwell on past hurts or to, nursing grudges.
Because that's just more emotion.
Exactly. Holding a grudge is an emotional anchor that clouds your reason. You look to the past strictly to educate yourself. You analyze history and your own mistakes, completely free of emotional baggage.
Let me just stop you there, though, because, are we seriously saying we have to view every single interaction as a manipulative, amoral game?
Yeah.
What about people who are just genuinely innocent? Or people whose entire goal in life is, fighting for total equality in the workplace? Surely there are people who just opt out of playing the power game.
The text actually addresses those people directly, and the conclusion is quite stark. Those who loudly claim to be non-players, who constantly flaunt their moral superiority or their exquisite sense of justice, they're usually the most adept manipulators in the room.
Wait, how is demanding equality a manipulation?
Look at the mechanics of the demand itself. If you demand that everyone be treated exactly the same and compensated exactly the same, regardless of their individual skill, output, or effort, you are actually deploying a highly effective power strategy. You're attempting to redistribute rewards based on your own terms, often to benefit yourself or your allies. Or, look at the display of weakness. Flaunting powerlessness is a subtle, deceptive way to coerce sympathy and control the behavior of those around you.
That makes sense, yeah.
True powerlessness doesn't usually have a PR team. The philosopher Nietzsche actually pointed out that lambs might decide that birds of prey are evil, but that doesn't stop the birds from thinking lambs taste delicious.
Wow.
You cannot opt out of gravity, and you cannot opt out of power dynamics.
So if we accept that this amoral game is just happening around us constantly, the most critical relationship any of us has to manage is the one with the person who holds the cards, the person who signs our paychecks, right? Our manager, our boss, our superior. And the text argues that navigating this relationship requires a very counterintuitive approach.
It requires extreme caution because people in positions of superiority are almost always incredibly fragile.
Yeah, for sure.
Their position is inherently unstable, which just breeds paranoia and vanity. To understand how badly this can go wrong, we really have to look at the story of Nicolas Fouquet. He was the finance minister to King Louis XIV of France in the 1660s.
What did Fouquet do?
So the prime minister of France had just died, and Fouquet desperately wanted to be named the successor. So he decides to ingratiate himself with the young King Louis by throwing the most spectacular, lavish party the world had ever seen at his new chateau, Vaux-le-Vicomte.
He went completely all out to impress the boss.
Oh, beyond anything we can imagine today. He commissioned a 7-course dinner featuring all these exotic foods from the Orient. He had Molière, the famous playwright, write and perform a brand new play just for the night.
Jeez.
He orchestrated massive fireworks displays over these incredible geometric gardens that were so beautiful they actually later inspired Versailles. I mean, it was an absolute masterpiece of an evening, attended by the highest nobility in Europe.
And the king's reaction to all this?
Well, the very next day, Fouquet was arrested by the king's head musketeer.
No way.
Yep. He was put on trial for embezzlement, which is ironic because mostly it was for financial maneuvers he had executed on the king's behalf. And he spent the last 20 years of his life in solitary confinement in a mountain prison.
All because he threw a great party.
Exactly.
But let's dig into the psychology of why this failed so spectacularly.
Well,
Fouquet thought he was showing loyalty and competence, right?
Right. But he fundamentally misunderstood the fragility of his superior. Louis XIV, the Sun King, needed to be the absolute, undisputed center of the universe. When Fouquet presented this incredible spectacle, it didn't make the king feel honored. It made him feel totally overshadowed.
Oh, I see.
It made it seem like his own finance minister had better taste, more wealth, and more influence than the king himself. Fouquet accidentally poked a massive hole in the master's vanity, and it destroyed him.
So compare that catastrophic failure to what Galileo did. Galileo was basically a freelancer at the time. He was in this precarious spot, constantly inventing scientific gadgets like a new compass, and just giving them to random wealthy dukes, hoping for a financial gift in return.
He's trying to make ends meet.
Yeah, living month to month, constantly begging for funding. Then, in 1610, he discovers the moons of Jupiter.
Which gave him a totally unique opportunity to change his entire strategy.
Right. Instead of just handing over a telescope to a random patron, Galileo dedicated the discovery of Jupiter's moons exclusively to the ruling Medici family. But he didn't just name the moons after them.
No, he went way further.
He wove this elaborate narrative claiming that the planet Jupiter was the cosmic symbol of the Medici dynasty, and that the 4 moons orbiting the planet represented the 4 Medici brothers constantly circling their founder.
He literally wrote them into the cosmos. He made them feel like celestial beings.
And the result was that Galileo was immediately made the official court philosopher and mathematician with a guaranteed lifetime salary. No more begging.
That is brilliant.
So translating this to you, the modern listener, if you are at work and you build an incredibly brilliant new financial model, or you come up with a genius marketing campaign, you don't present it as a monument to your own brilliance.
No, because if your boss is insecure, which, let's face it, most are, presenting it as your singular genius will just trigger their defense mechanisms. You actively ascribe your brilliant ideas to them.
Yeah, make it about them.
You frame it by saying, based on your vision for our Q3 efficiency, I built this model to execute your strategy. You make your output seem like a natural extension of their wisdom. You have to willingly mute your own brilliance in the moment to allow the person with the power to feel like the sun around which you are orbiting.
So you survive the boss by checking your ego at the door and playing the dutiful subordinate. But humans need an outlet, right? We naturally want to let our guard down, relax, and just be ourselves with our friends and colleagues.
Sure, it's human nature.
But the text argues that doing so is actually the most dangerous thing you can possibly do.
It really is the hardest concept for people to accept because we are wired to want to work with our friends.
Yeah.
But the text presents a brutal truth. Friends are the most dangerous people to elevate into your professional orbit.
Let's look at the mechanics of why that is through the story of Michael III of Byzantium. So we're in the 9th century. Michael is a young emperor surrounded by plotters and intriguers. He desperately needs someone he can trust, absolutely. So he elevates his best friend, a peasant horse trainer named Basilius, to the position of chief counselor.
Which, on paper, seems entirely logical. Basilius had literally saved Michael's life from a wild horse.
Right.
Michael loved him like a brother. He sent him to the finest schools, showered him with gold, and even had his own ambitious uncle assassinated because Basilius advised him to do it.
He gave him everything. And how did the best friend repay this absolute trust? Basilius got addicted to the power. When Michael finally, gently asked him to pay back some of the massive financial loans he had given him, Basilius was insulted.
Oh, wow.
The horse trainer had quietly used the emperor's money to build up his own loyal faction within the army. A few weeks later, Michael woke up surrounded by soldiers. Basilius stood there and watched them murder his best friend, took the throne, and paraded Michael's head on a pike through the streets.
It's horrific, but it exposes the paradox of trust and gratitude. When you hire a friend, or do a massive favor for a friend, your act of kindness fundamentally unbalances the relationship. The receipt of a huge favor can actually become psychologically oppressive. People desperately want to feel that they earn their success through their own merit.
It's exactly like feeding a stray cat.
Oh, good analogy.
The first time you put a bowl of milk on the porch, the cat is incredibly grateful. But if you keep doing it every single day, the dynamic shifts. The cat starts to feel entitled to the food. The gratitude rots into expectation. They forget it was ever a gift, and if you were 5 minutes late with the milk one morning, they scratch you.
That is the perfect analogy for why gratitude is such a volatile emotion, which is why the text suggests looking in the exact opposite direction.
Utilizing your enemies.
Okay, utilizing enemies. How does that work? Well, take Emperor Sung of China in the 10th century. Chinese emperors had been dealing with this relentless cycle of military coups for generations. Generals would constantly assassinate the emperor to take the throne. Emperor Sun broke the pattern, not by trusting his friends, but by neutralizing them and elevating his enemies.
He threw a massive banquet for his most powerful military commanders, his supposed allies, right?
Right.
He got them drunk and then essentially bribed them. He offered them lavish estates and infinite wealth if they would just resign their commands and leave the capital. He paid his friends to stay far away from power.
Exactly, because he knew they would eventually feel entitled to his throne. But his treatment of his enemies was even more radical.
What did he do?
When a rebel enemy, King Lu, surrendered to him, Emperor Sung didn't execute him. He gave him a high rank in the imperial court. He invited this former enemy to drink wine with him alone. King Lu was terrified, convinced the wine was poisoned. Emperor Sung just laughed, drank the wine himself, and from that moment on, King Lu became his most fiercely loyal subject.
But what is the psychology behind that? Why does the enemy become the loyal servant while the friend becomes the traitor?
It's pretty simple when you break it down. A person who expects the guillotine and is suddenly spared experiences true, unburdened gratitude. An enemy has completely clean slate. They expect no favors, so they feel no entitlement. More importantly, they have everything to prove.
Right.
A friend feels condescended to when you give them a job. An enemy is highly motivated to prove that your mercy was a smart investment. Mao Zedong actually wrote about this dynamic, noting that the threat of the Japanese invasion was the best thing that could have happened to his ragtag army. The presence of a formidable enemy sharpens your wits and forces you to be disciplined. Without an enemy, you grow lazy and complacent.
So bosses are fragile and friends are entitled. If we are minimizing our brilliance upward and keeping our friends out of our professional lives, how do we handle day-to-day interactions with everyone else? The text suggests that the key is strictly controlling what people know about your mind.
Right, because humans are visually and cognitively wired to trust appearances. We only have so much processing power. If you dangle a shiny object or a seemingly obvious motive in front of someone, their brain will lock onto that decoy and they will completely fail to notice what your hands are actually doing.
Which brings us to the brilliant con artist, the Yellow Kid Weil.
Oh, this is a great story.
Weil wanted to extract a massive sum of money from a very savvy, highly suspicious Chicago businessman named Sam Giesel. Weil knew if he approached Giesel with a high-stakes, shady gamble, Giesel would immediately walk away. So Weil constructed a massive, incredibly boring smokescreen. He approached Giesel with a completely mundane, legitimate-sounding real estate deal for a hunting lodge.
And the psychology of the decoy is vital here. The hunting lodge deal was so familiar and so boring that it completely lowered Giesel's defenses. His cognitive load was entirely focused on the minutiae of real estate contracts.
Right. Giesel gets completely engrossed. On the train ride to finalize this boring deal, Giesel happens to bring along a flabby, out-of-shape guy he casually mentions is a promising prizefighter. Giesel barely registers it because he's stressing over the real estate. When they finally meet the financiers selling the lodge, a staged argument breaks out. Giesel challenges the financiers to a boxing match between their fighters to settle a minor point.
And Giesel is already deeply psychologically committed to the real estate deal. He wants to stay on the financier's good side to get the lodge, so he gets pulled right into the orbit of this secondary event.
Giesel gets so caught up, he puts down $35,000 of his own cash for the bet.
Wow.
The fight starts. The financier's fighter takes a swing, and Veal's flabby boxer goes down hard. Blood is spurting from his mouth. A fake doctor checks his pulse and screams that the man is dead.
Oh my God.
Right. The financiers start yelling that the police are coming and everyone in the room is going down for murder.
And the rational businessman's brain completely short circuits.
Giesel literally runs for his life. He sprints out of the gym, hops a train back to Chicago, and leaves his $35,000 sitting on the table just thrilled he isn't going to prison. The second he's gone, the dead boxer stands up, spits out a ball of hot water and chicken blood, and the con artists divide the cash.
Incredible. Giesel understood that the brain cannot process multiple threats at once. By offering a bland, familiar front, he mesmerized his target. And this concept of concealing your intentions ties perfectly into another vital mechanic.
Yeah.
The weaponization of silence.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, when you speak, you inherently reveal your hand, your insecurities, and your limitations. King Louis XIV, despite his vanity, was a master of this. His ministers would spend hours violently arguing over state policy in front of him. When they finally finished and looked to the king for a decision, he would simply look at them and say, "I shall see." And then he would just leave the room.
Just, I shall see.
That was it. By deploying absolute silence, he forced his anxious ministers to keep talking to fill the void. And the more they scrambled to fill the silence, the more they revealed their true intentions, their alliances, and their weaknesses. Silence isn't just about avoiding mistakes. It is a powerful tool to draw out your opponent.
But silence can also literally be the difference between life and death. Look at the Russian rebel Kondraty Ryleyev in the 19th century. He led a rebellion against Tsar Nicholas I and was sentenced to death by hanging. Ryleyev is standing on the gallows. The trapdoor opens. Well, the trapdoor opens and the rope snaps in half. He falls to the ground, bruised but alive.
Now, at that specific time in history, surviving a botched execution was widely viewed as a sign of divine providence. The custom was almost always to pardon the victim.
Right, all he had to do was lay there and keep his mouth shut. But the adrenaline is pumping, his ego takes over, and he just can't resist. He stands up, dusts the dirt off his clothes, and shouts to the crowd, "You see, in Russia, they don't know how to do anything properly, not even how to make rope."
Oh, an absolute failure of emotional control.
Exactly. Meanwhile, a messenger runs to the Tsar to tell him the rope broke. The Tsar was literally in the process of signing Ryleyev's pardon. But he pauses and asks the messenger, "Did he say anything?" The messenger repeats the insult about Russian rope making. The Tsar puts his pen down and says, "In that case, let us prove the contrary." He tears the pardon into pieces. Ryleyev is hanged the next day, and they made sure the rope was thick enough.
Ouch.
But wait, is this constant silence and concealment actually sustainable? If we look at today's corporate world, transparency is basically a religion. We're constantly told to bring our authentic selves to work, to share our struggles, to communicate constantly. Doesn't acting like a silent, brooding king just make you look incompetent or weird?
Well, the source text would argue that modern transparency is a trap. Total honesty makes you entirely predictable. When you tell everyone everything you are thinking, you become familiar, and familiarity breeds contempt. It makes it impossible for people to revere you.
That's interesting.
Silence, conversely, makes you appear profound. When you say less, people project their own meaning onto your blank slate. It creates an aura of power that constant chatter completely destroys.
So if you are barely talking and you are hiding your true motives behind decoys, you're practically invisible. How do you actually get anything done or advance in the world if you're constantly shrinking into the background?
You don't shrink into the background. You project an incredibly specific, curated image. You must meticulously build a reputation, and you must court sheer attention. Reputation is a magical multiplier. With the right reputation, you can intimidate your opponents and win battles without ever firing a single shot.
There's an amazing story from ancient China about Chuko Liang, a general known as the Sleeping Dragon. He was resting in a small town with only 100 soldiers. Suddenly, sentinels rush in and tell him that a massive enemy army of 150,000 men is marching right toward them, led by his bitter rival, Sima Yi.
Mathematically, he is entirely dead.
But he doesn't panic. He orders his 100 troops to hide. He has them take down all the flags and literally throw the city gates wide open. Then Liang puts on traditional Taoist robes, sits on the highest, most exposed part of the city wall, lights some incense, and casually starts playing a lute.
So Sima Yi arrives with 150,000 heavily armed men, stares at these completely open gates, and sees his greatest rival just sitting there playing music.
Sima Yi knew Liang's reputation. He knew Liang was famous for brilliant, deadly, complex traps. Because that reputation was so deeply ingrained in his mind, Sima Yi looked at a defenseless man playing a lute and hallucinated a massive, lethal ambush.
Unbelievable.
He was so terrified by the sheer audacity of the display that he ordered his entire army of 150,000 men to turn around and retreat.
That is the power of a curated reputation. It does the fighting for you. But before you can rely on a reputation, you have to ensure people actually know you exist. You cannot get lost in the crowd. You have to court attention at all costs.
And the pioneer of this mechanic is P.T. Barnum.
Yes, the master.
Early in his career, Barnum was working for a circus owner named Turner. One afternoon, Barnum was walking down the street in a nice new suit, and suddenly a violent mob surrounded him, screaming and ready to lynch him on the spot.
Aye.
Because someone had just spread a rumor through town that Barnum was a notorious murderer who had recently been acquitted on a technicality. Barnum had to literally beg the mob to follow him back to the circus so he could prove his identity to the police.
And who is the architect of that rumor?
His own boss, Turner. Barnum was furious that he almost died, but Turner just looked at him and said, "All we need to ensure success is notoriety." And the circus sold out that night, and the next night, and the night after that. The mob wanted to see the guy who almost got lynched.
Any attention is good attention.
Exactly. Barnum realized a fundamental truth. Any attention, even scandalous or negative attention, brings power. It brings eyes, and eyes bring influence. Years later, when Barnum opened his own museum, he would hire a beggar to just silently lay brick on
Just to create an anomaly in the environment.
Exactly. It was so weird that it drew a crowd. People would stand there staring at this bricklayer, and eventually they would buy tickets to the museum just to figure out what was going on.
So translating this to your career today, think about the person in your office who puts their head down, grinds out incredible work quietly, and never speaks up in meetings. Now think about the person whose work is mediocre, but who is constantly presenting, networking, and making a little bit of noise. Who gets the promotion?
The one making noise.
The one who controls the attention. The text advises you to build your reputation on one single, simple, sterling quality. Maybe it's absolute honesty, maybe it's ruthless efficiency, or maybe it's brilliant creativity. But whatever it is, make it simple, broadcast it loudly, and let it do the heavy lifting before you even enter the room.
Okay, let's pull all these mechanics together. We've mapped out some incredibly stark terrain today. We explored the absolute necessity of freezing your emotions and diagnosing your problems like a mechanic. We looked at why you have to massage the fragile ego of the people who hold power over you.
We examined the dangerous entitlement of friends and the surprising utility of putting your enemies to work.
We broke down the cognitive tricks of smokescreens and decoys and how deploying strategic silence can force your opponents to destroy themselves. And finally, we looked at how reputation and attention form an invisible armor that fights your battles for you.
And this brings us right back to you, the listener. It is tempting to dismiss these stories as ancient history. But the psychological drivers of the Sun King or Emperor Sung or the Yellow Kid are exactly the same drivers operating in your manager, your siblings, and your clients right now. Choosing to ignore these dynamics because you prefer the illusion of a fair, polite society is a choice to remain vulnerable. You don't have to use these tools maliciously, but you absolutely must understand how the machine works.
So, as you head back into your own glass-walled arenas, we want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. If everyone in society fully accepted this amoral reality, if every single person around you mastered these laws, hid their intentions perfectly, and managed their reputations flawlessly, would society collapse into a state of endless, paranoid, cutthroat warfare? Or would we actually end up creating a perfectly polite, entirely frictionless world where everyone plays their role beautifully and our true intentions become the ultimate hidden luxury? Until next time, watch your back.